As we begin today, please keep your camera and sound off until we enter into the Q&A portion of the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Beth, for getting us all situated here and getting everyone admitted from our waiting room this afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are really excited for what I know is going to be a really incredible conversation this afternoon. And so I first and foremost want to thank a really great group of panelists for taking the time to be with us, as well as a really awesome group of attendees. And so I know we're going to have really meaningful conversation today. As Beth has mentioned, we are going to try our absolute hardest to leave time for some Q&A at the end of the hour. And so as you have questions, as we work our way through a couple of scripted questions with our panelists, if anything prompts a question that you have that you want to ask to the group, please feel free to use the chat feature. So you can just type that in the chat feature as we go. And then as we get closer to the end of the hour, we will leave some time and hopefully have a chance to address at least a couple of those. And so don't be shy about sharing those with the group. And otherwise, as already mentioned, we do ask that you remain muted so that we can hear our panelists nice and clearly and everything that they're going to be able to share with us this afternoon. My name is Paige Oxendine, which I should have shared first and foremost. I'm the assistant director here at the eFactory and also a co-founder of Rosie alongside Rachel Anderson, director here at the eFactory. And I know Rachel is on the call as well this afternoon. We are really so thankful to have such a strong partnership with United We, Beth and the whole team there. Many of you on the call this afternoon probably know that it was through United We, known at the time as the Women's Foundation in Kansas City, that Rosie here in Springfield in Southwest Missouri actually got its start. And I was thinking about that earlier today. November, so just a couple of months from now, will actually be 5 years since Rosie got its start here in Springfield, which is incredible to think about and absolutely would not have been possible if it weren't for the support from United We. And so we're so thankful to maintain that strong partnership and to have the opportunity to collaborate on really important programming like what we're going to do here today. And so I know we're eager to dive in. We have some really great questions to ask our panelists. But I do want to quickly turn it over to a great friend and another great partner at United We, President and CEO Wendy Doyle, who is going to share a couple of words before we get started with our panel.
Paige, thank you so much for the introduction. And I can't believe it's been 5 years. Wow. I want to thank you and Rachel for your leadership, for your friendship and support. It's just been our honor to have such a tremendous partner. And we just wanted to start by just sharing with the audience, further introduce who United We is just a little bit. United We works to advance all women economically and civically. And we do that in a couple of capacities. One being we are an evidence-based research organization. So we commission a lot of research, really look at the data to inform us on where we can make this most significant impact. And we spend a lot of time looking at innovative solutions and nonpartisan policy work that we can champion to really inspire and encourage women to be economically successful. And then our civic leadership component you see here on the screen is the Appointments Project. And that is really helping women serve in a leadership capacity into their communities, counties, and certainly at the state level. And I know Beth will share a little bit more about that. But just one quick update we wanted to share that we've been championing for Missouri is that we currently are hosting 7 town hall sessions around the state of Missouri. And we really want to bring to life our quantitative research and really hear women's voices, ideas, stories as we certainly move to post-COVID-19 recovery and what we can do to support women to spur that recovery forward. So we wanted to let you know about that. There is an opportunity on October 28th to virtually, it's a statewide town hall session from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. that will be virtual. And just wanted to make you aware, if it works for your schedules, we invite you to join us for that conversation. And then if it's not for you, then certainly share that with others in your circle of influence too, that we really just want to hear what is on women's minds. So with that, thank you for being here. And again, it's our honor to have such a great partnership with the eFactory and Rosie. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Beth Felsky, who is the Appointments Project Director, to take it away.
Thanks, Wendy. As Wendy said, I'm Beth Felsky, and I'm the Appointments Project Director for United We. And the Appointments Project was established to increase the number of women serving in civic leadership positions and decrease the barriers which prevent them from doing so. We are nonpartisan and nonprofit and research-based. So the Appointments Project was established in response to the research to empower women and make the process easier for women to apply to boards and commissions. And we also know when women apply to boards and commissions and get engaged at that level, they oftentimes go on to run for public office. We're excited to partner today with Rosie, and thank you, Paige, for hosting us, and really excited to present 3 amazing women in civic leadership and hear about their personal journey and a little bit about policy that they're working on today. From our panelists today, you will hear from Missouri Representative Elizabeth or Betsy Fogel, and she represents Greene County District 135 in the Missouri House of Representatives. She was elected to her first 2-year term in November 2020. Missouri Representative Crystal Quaid represents part of Greene County District 132 in Missouri House of Representatives. She was elected to her first term in office in November 2016 and re-elected in 2018. She also served as the House Minority Floor Leader for the 100th General Assembly. And Springfield City Councilwoman Heather Hardinger holds General A Springfield City Council seat. She is currently serving her second term as City Councilwoman. She serves as Chairwoman of the Mayor's Commission for Human Rights and Community, and was appointed by Governor Parsons to serve on the U.S. Census Complete Committee in 2020. With that, we'll start today's discussion. We're going to begin today's panel discussion by talking a little bit with each panelist about your elected role, some of the responsibilities and committees and boards that you serve on, and just kind of some basic background information to familiarize attendees with your role. Councilwoman Hardinger, can we start with you today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Beth. I'm very thrilled to be here with all of you today. I was appointed by the Women's Foundation to the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights in 2017, and that was an amazing experience. I had to unfortunately give that up in order to run for City Council, but I do remain very connected to the Human Rights Commission. They do a lot of great work. Just a little bit about the elected role I hold. So as a general council person, I don't have a district or a zone. I'm general, so I cover the entire city. So right now I'm currently learning a lot about different aspects of our community, what the needs are, what the challenges are, what are we doing well. So after being elected in April, that's really been my focus for the last several months. The committees that I serve on, so council members are assigned specific committees, and we can also volunteer to participate in others. So I serve on the Finance Administration Committee, the Community Involvement Committee, and I also I'll serve on the ARPA Review Committee as well. So those federal funds that are being infused in our community, I kind of oversee with, under the leadership of Matt Simpson, we are overseeing all of those different ideas, and we will be bringing recommendations to the full council. So that's a lot of responsibility, but it's also really interesting to learn how all of these pieces fit together and how they work. In addition to serving on the committees through council, I also serve on other boards and commissions. I serve as vice chair of a national nonprofit board called Bread for the World in Washington, D.C. So the issue of hunger and poverty, not just domestically, but internationally, is a huge passion of mine. So I'm very proud to serve on that board. And I also serve on the Cox Health Young Professional Council. We talk about a lot of things related to healthcare access, disparities, and that sort of thing, and what we as young professionals can do to influence that. So I'm really glad to be a part of that. I think responsibilities wise, of course, just to give you some context, we meet every other Monday night for city council meetings. Some of you may be nerding out and already watch those, or you come in person, God bless you. And we also meet every Tuesday for lunch and a study session. So in addition to that, of course, we have our committee meetings throughout the month, and then we have various meetings throughout the community to support things the city is doing, or listening sessions with our community members. So in a nutshell, that's been my experience with City Council for the past several months, and I'm really, really proud to serve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hardinger. Let's go to Representative Vogel. Can you tell us a little bit about your role, responsibilities, and committees and boards?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm Betsy Fogel. I just finished my first term as a state representative in, of course, the great city of Jefferson City here in Missouri. I am a freshman and recently got elected, and I'll share a little bit of information about that. I represent the 135th district, which means I have Central East Springfield. For those of you who are familiar with our area, I represent a total of about 36,000 people. That's the size of our House districts here in Missouri. And before serving in my current role, I had the opportunity to spend about 6 years working in the public health space, which very much is my motivation and was my motivation for running for office. So kind of the day-to-day and what my current role looks like. Session here in Missouri is, of course, in from January, the beginning of January through middle of May. And I and 162 of my closest friends passed policy up in Jeff City. You know that we hope to make Missouri better, and we hope to leave our legacy behind us. I will share myself and Representative Quaid, who's also on the call. We are the only two Democrats in the lower half of the state. And of course, this is a nonpartisan event, but I think it's important to know what that means for us who are in what we call the super minority in Jeff City, meaning that if Democrats walked out of the building, Republicans could pass any policy that they wanted. They don't need our votes. Which in my opinion is not good government. Good government looks like balanced government. And I'll talk a little bit about another component of that. Of course, we are a handful of women in the southern half of the state as well. And to have balanced government and good government, we know that means we need more women, which I'm so thankful that all of you on this call chose to join us. So day-to-day in Jeff City looks like a lot of committee hearings where we debate some great policy, in my opinion, some terrible policy. I think we passed a total of about 40 bills this year. So we spent 5 months debating hundreds of hours worth of legislation, and the governor will ultimately end up signing about 40 of those pieces of legislation, which in my opinion is a good thing. It's our job up there to slow things down from time to time. I also have the privilege of serving on the budget committee. So I'm one of a handful of people who decide where we appropriate all of our state dollars. And I think looking through the names of the people on this call, you guys understand how important it is that we appropriate those dollars in a fiscally responsible way and in a way that serves our community. The budget is a moral document, and where we spend our dollars shows our values as a state. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be one of the people that are up there fighting for our values and our morals down here in Springfield. So I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better later on, but thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Representative Fogel. Representative Quaid, what can you share about your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. This is super exciting. Yes, so I, like Representative Fogel, represent about 36,000 people here in the city of Springfield in the 132nd district, which is downtown Center City all the way up to Commercial Street, and I go west to West Bypass. So if anyone is in the northwestern part of town, then I am your state representative. And I have been serving since 2017. Now, I also have the great honor of being the minority floor leader in the House. So I kind of jokingly call it like I'm captain of the Democrats. And what that means is I am in charge of all the floor strategy that we do when bills come up for debate. I also have the honor of selecting what committee every Democrat serves on. And so it was Betsy is talking about being on the budget committee. We have an amazing team of people, and she is so great on that committee, which is, in my opinion, the most important place to be in Jefferson City. I also get to I handle all the HR stuff, the non-fun things. I handle all of the press. And then I also am in charge of the campaign arm for the Democrats in the House. So it's my job to find and recruit 163 people to run for office and convince them to do it and try to help them win as many seats as we can. So I wear multiple hats. In the House, I do not serve on any committee specifically. I'm actually ex officio on every single committee. So what that means is when we're talking strategy, I work with my colleagues to figure out if I should come in and sit in, whether that's to enforce the rules of the House, to if it's a highly contentious political argument, or if there's something going on like a member is not treating a citizen who's there to testify appropriately, I will go in and kind of exert my influence as leader to apply some pressure in those committee hearings. And sometimes we just need an extra voice. As Representative Fogel alluded to, we are in the super minority. So our committee structures are all based on percentages of seats that we hold in the House. So oftentimes you will have a committee of 7 or 9 Republicans to 2 Democrats. And so I often will go in and sit down and just be an extra body for whatever that discussion may be that we're working on. So it's been a huge honor to get to be the leader. I'm in my 3rd term as floor leader. I was actually the youngest elected to be minority leader in Missouri's history. And I was 2nd youngest in the country when I was elected, which next to Oklahoma, our neighboring state, had another woman who was about a year younger than me when she was elected to this role. So it's been a really exciting experience. And I have one more term in the House. Hopefully I will get to serve in this capacity again after the next election cycle.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Obviously, your plates are full with all your activities, so just amazing. And as we talk about that, let's dive into your personal journey into leadership. Maybe we'll start with Representative Fogel for this question. If you could talk about, what made you decide that you wanted to run for elective office, and kind of what was that tipping point to where, okay, tomorrow's the day, when, kind of what did that process look like for you?
So a lot of you on the call probably know who my parents are. And I think it's important to share that part of their story because they definitely have modeled what it means to be a civic leader and engage in the civic process and what it means to sacrifice your time and your energy for the greater good of your community. So I always like to make sure that I give them the applause that they deserve for being wonderful parents who modeled that for me. Like I mentioned earlier, my background is in public health. So the first few years I worked at Jordan Valley Community Health Center, which is a health center here in Springfield, and we provide medical, dental, behavioral health services to low-income residents, low-income neighbors. My first few years in that role, I operated as a social worker. I'm not an LCSW by training, but my degrees are in sociology and had the pleasure of meeting with patients and doing Medicaid applications, food stamps, individuals that were experiencing homelessness, victims of domestic violence, all these different things. And I just kept seeing the way that our society and our community and our government were failing these individuals. And at a certain point, when you are delivering pregnancy test results to moms who don't have a safe place to go, or meeting somebody who is having a substance use crisis and can't afford to see a doctor and you're having to turn them away, you start to realize what are the practical solutions to these problems and wanting to go upstream instead of just fighting all of the consequences downstream. So those kinds of things were kind of floating around in my head. And then Representative Quaid took me out to coffee a few years ago and said that they were looking for a candidate in the 135th. I'd owned a home here for a few years. And after about 10 minutes, we were sitting at Big Mama's on Commercial Street. She said, "Hey, is this something you'd ever be interested in?" And I said, "Absolutely." I jumped in and I did it. And I think the importance of that story to me is, we as women, and I'm talking in generalizations, of course, oftentimes have to be asked to do things before we're willing to just jump in and think we're going to be innately great. We see this all the time in Jeff City. Our male colleagues, they can talk for 30 minutes about something they know nothing about because they've been socialized to do so. Where us as women, when I get up on a mic, I want to know exactly what I'm going to say. I want to know that I'm correct. I want to know that I'm being thoughtful. And so I think that just shows the importance of bringing along women beside you. And if it wasn't for Representative Quaid taking a chance on me as another young female, we wouldn't have a second Democrat in the lower half of the state. And if you take one thing away from what I say today, I hope all the women on this call, and men, if there are some that joined us, the importance of building those relationships, because in my opinion, women do it better.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing your story. Representative Quaid, what was kind of the decision-making point for you to run?
Yeah, well, I am a little bit different than I decided very early on, about 10 years before I actually ran that I was going to run for office. I'm a first generation high school graduate and went to school here at Missouri State, and my degree is in social work. And it was really when I was studying social work, we had to do public policy courses and realized that everything I wanted to do as a social worker was dictated by public policy. And so I convinced the university to let me do my internship in Jefferson City. And when I got there, I realized very, very quickly that unfortunately, our elected officials really are not these amazing superheroes that I thought that they were. I realized very quickly that they are just regular folks, and a lot of them didn't have the perspective that I felt was necessary for the things that I really cared about. And with a background in social work, there's, you'll look at the legislation that I have filed and worked on. A lot of that stems around poverty and children and health. And a lot of the folks who were up there making decisions didn't live the life that I had lived. And I felt like that perspective was really necessary. And so honestly, it was when I was 19 years old, I was like, I'm going to do this one day. And then every decision after that kind of led me to that space. Prior to becoming an elected official, I worked for Care to Learn, a wonderful organization here in town I'm sure y'all are familiar with. And it was really when my predecessor termed out, we do have term limits here in Missouri, you can only serve 8 years in the House, that seat was open. And he knew me and he suggested that I run, and I thought about it, and it was good timing for my husband and I, as good as timing as it can be. Let's be real, there's never really good timing. But it made sense for us, and so we jumped in. And to Betsy's point, even as someone who decided very early on that I knew I wanted to do this work at some point, when the time came, we spent a good 6 months trying to decide if we were going to actually do it then, because you never feel ready. You never, all the ducks aren't in a row. And especially as women, I'm a mom of 3, and I had a career I loved, and it was a huge sacrifice to jump in for something that you don't know that you're going to actually be able to achieve. So, it was a long journey to get here, but I'm so happy that I was able to do it.
Thank you, Representative Quaid. I wish I knew what I wanted to do at 19. Councilwoman Hardinger, can you talk a little bit about when you wanted to really get involved in civic leadership?
Sure. This has definitely been a journey for me. So I grew up, my home state is Alaska. And when I graduated from high school, I graduated a little early, and I wanted to pursue something a little different. At the time, I was really focused on attending law school. The economy after I graduated from college did not lead me in that direction, and I'm actually grateful for that. But I ended up working in my state capital in the state Senate. So that was my first job. It's interesting because I was actually a bit too young to start working there. I was a few months shy of being 18, but they wrangled a few things around, and I got my first working experiences working in the Senate chambers in Juneau. I think through that experience, I also had an internship after that in Washington, D.C. with my state senator. It definitely helped me see and understand kind of the dark side of politics in a sense, kind of how the sausage is made and who is really doing the work. So I have a lot of respect for staffers who really are behind the scenes doing a lot of that work and supporting their representatives. So I actually had kind of a negative taste in my mouth after my experiences with that. It was amazing, but kind of as Representative Quaid was sharing, seeing these folks as heroes for such a long time and then really getting the behind the scenes look, that really impacted not just how I viewed the nature of politics, but also how I view community and the power that we have as citizens to create and enact change. So I have quite a bit of experience in public policy advocacy. I do have a master's degree in public policy, so I'm a public policy nerd, and I really saw my future as really focusing behind the scenes and advocating for policies, good policies, at the state, local, and national level. But I believe this was like around this time last year, few people reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to run for city council. And I just laughed at that. I was like, no, that's not for me. I've always said, I will support really good candidates. I don't really see myself doing that. I don't see myself running. But I really started to think about the landscape that we're in. And one thing that really stood out to me is that there has never been a woman of color to serve on Springfield City Council. And as a Black biracial person, representation has always been really important to me, and that's something that I really push in the local community. And just the importance of having that representation in council and the perspectives that I bring to the table with my diverse experiences. I'm really starting to see now, about 6 or 7 months in, how that's making a difference and how my voice is necessary. And as we've discussed a little bit before, elected officials aren't necessarily, special people, even though I think we often put politicians on a pedestal. But many people had the motivation to serve and make their community better. And I think that that's definitely what's motivated me to run and be involved in the community. Serving on the Human Rights Commission definitely gave me a taste for that. Even a few months before I ran, I presented to City Council, not knowing that in a few short months I would be sitting on the dais and enacting local policy. So I think my primary motivation, though, was thinking about the legacy that we're leaving and the importance of setting our future generations up for success. I have 2 nieces. I know a lot of little kids that live in Springfield. And I think about the struggles and the challenges that we face as a society and as a community today. And I really hope that we can do the work in this generation to set them up for success. So that's my primary motivation. I decided to run basically at the last minute. So I was really scrambling, kind of threw together a campaign, and everything really worked out well. But yeah, it was very nerve-wracking doing this, working full time. There were a lot of challenges along the way, but it's a decision that I'm really proud of, and I'm glad that I ran for office.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hardiger, that's a really good segue. I want to touch on something you had mentioned, and you had some exposure to politics and other leaders. And my next question, and I'm going to hit it back to you real quick, and then we'll move on. But obviously there were maybe some doubts and hesitation. And so can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Or once you started your campaign, a couple examples of maybe some of the barriers as a woman or maybe as a Black woman that you could share with the group.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there were a lot of just mental barriers for me. I think when I really started getting serious about running and was collecting signatures and really analyzing, is this something I can really do? This is a lot of responsibility. This is taking up a lot of time. But I had a lot of support from my family who were really encouraging me to put myself out there and do this, including my 10-year-old niece, Ariana, who was just like, Auntie, this is great for you. I'm very proud of you. And, having that encouragement from her was really huge. It went a long way in helping me continue my confidence throughout my campaign. I felt like, in a sense, that the campaign was challenging. Obviously, we're living in a really challenging time right now, and there are a lot of conflicting opinions about things. I think one thing that made this particular race a bit easier is that it is a nonpartisan race. I think that there are a lot of folks that really just want you to say, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? And I really tried to answer that question by really speaking to my values, instead of putting myself in a box. And I think that really helps us on City Council work better together without that partisan barrier. But as a woman, I feel like I was a bit intimidated, if I'm honest, about the process and about not really seeing a woman like me who had been in the same position. I felt like it was a lot of, and I still feel it's a lot of responsibility. But I also felt like I was up to the task. And this is not the first time that I've done something professionally that other people haven't done. So it just kind of, I took a lot of deep breaths. I got a new therapist. That was also a very life-changing experience. I highly recommend it to anyone. But I think that overcoming it was a matter of thinking about what problems I want to solve and how I can uniquely be positioned to help solve some of those problems. Right now, we're having a lot of discussions specifically about the issues of homelessness in our community, public safety, and kind of the complications that come with that. These are all really important things, and I'm really appreciating listening to citizens and hearing about how some of these issues are affecting them and what we might be able to do. A lot of politics happens at the local level. I think the majority of Americans might not realize that. And of course, sitting in council chambers or watching city council meeting and staying updated and informed is probably the least sexy thing I can think of. But it's so important. And I really want to encourage more young people and people of color and people with diverse backgrounds to really get involved in your community and consider where you might be able to step up and lead. Because sometimes you may not think that your voice is the most important, but there are certain circumstances where your voice is one of the only voices that can lend to a conversation or move an initiative or move a community forward in the right direction. So grateful to be on council. I think that I work with a lot of amazing colleagues, both on council and through the city of Springfield. I just can't say enough good things about the folks that really do a lot of the work that you see when you're watching the screen, a lot of the research and a lot of the development work. So city employees, if you're on this call, and I know some of you are, thank you so much for everything that you do. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think that there are a lot of barriers that women face. It would be extremely hard for somebody with children to work a full-time job and do this. It is a volunteer role, so this is not something that we get paid to do. But I think it's one of the most important roles out there right now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Representative Quaid, what are your thoughts on maybe some of the barriers, especially, having a family to juggle as well?
Yeah, so I definitely want to echo a lot of what Heather said. There are just out the gate a lot of mental barriers that I think, especially as women, kind of get in the way, and there's a lot of doubts, a lot of second guessing. But beyond those things, which I think all of us face in leadership roles, regardless of whether it's elected office or in your workplace, definitely the child aspect was a huge barrier for me, in terms of just, to be frank, mom guilt. I still have it. I'm gone 5 months out of the year, Monday through Thursday. And that is, it's been 5 years, and that's a very long time to be away from my children. But that's part of it, and that's part of public service and making sure that they have their needs met and all of those things. But when you take that child aspect, I'm going to kind of take it to the next level, and it was definitely used against me in the campaign world. So I had a primary my first year. If anyone paid attention, you may remember the story where my opponent actually called me the nice young girl who just had a baby, even though my kid was 2. And that was a topic of conversation. There were news stories written about it. I had folks who were supporters of mine ask me things like, well, what are you going to do with your kids? And of course, I'm like, well, they have a father and he's perfectly capable. Nobody's asking my male counterparts those questions. And then there are the barriers around that where, quite frankly, when a male colleague goes and knocks doors and takes their kid on their shoulders, it's a cute photo op and they're like, oh, what a great dad. But if I knock on a door and my kid's there, they're like, oh, she can't balance all of that. What are you going to do? And there's just such a, predisposed opinion that folks have within this space for women to be doing multiple things at once. So that one was a big one for me, just trying to overcome that. I would say that also there's, Betsy alluded to the fact that her and I are the only Democrats in the southern half of the state. And to Heather's point, when there's politics involved, that is a whole additional barrier. We are in a very conservative part of our state. And, my first year I had to raise $130,000. I know Betsy raised way more than that, which is a whole lot of money for a job that we get paid $35,000 a year for. And so, for me, one of the big mental barriers related to that is, I worked in the nonprofit sector and my job was to raise money to feed hungry children. And I really struggled with the mental switch of I can get a hot meal for a kid for $1, but I have to raise $130,000 to go to Jefferson City. Like, why should I ask people for money from me? Why not these things that are so important, so much more important than me? And it was having this mental shift of recognizing that the policies that I want to enact help those children. And that's why I'm doing this, and trying to think about yourself more as a brand versus a person, or not just the brand, but the public policy that you're trying to get done. And that's a really hard transition. And even now, I am definitely an advocate for getting money out of politics. I think the way that we do it is not the correct way, but it is the way that we live right now. And so it's that part for me, excuse me, I'm sitting downtown, so if you hear sounds, I apologize. But that mental shift for me was a really difficult one, to just get over that barrier. But there's a lot more, but I know that we're short on time, but as politicians, we can keep talking, but I'll hand it over to Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Representative Fogel, what were maybe some of the barriers for you?
I also will echo a lot of what Heather and Crystal already said, and won't reiterate those. But for me, going back to the having children conversation, I don't have children. And it's interesting that gets used against me in a way that my female counterparts who do have children, that gets used as ammunition. For me on the campaign trail, I heard a lot of, well, aren't you too young to do this? Or wait your turn? Or what makes you think you have the experience to write state policy? Or shouldn't you be at home trying to meet a husband and trying to have kids? So it's interesting to hear my colleagues' perspectives who come down on the other side of it. I think that what that teaches us is no matter what our life experiences are, there are going to be people who are critical of you. And for me, that is the biggest mental barrier or the biggest mental block in getting involved in politics, especially after the 2016 and then the 2020 national level elections. There is not a lot of room left for grace in the political world. And I wish that wasn't the case. And I know the three of us, as your elected officials on this call, are very much fighting against that and trying to put empathy and love and compassion back into the political world. But it's very hard. And living, Representative Quaid alluded to this earlier. I myself raised a lot of money, and my opponent raised over $200,000 that was spent against me, and the Republican Party spent another almost $200,000. And that number one is absolutely crazy. I think we should do a lot of reform in the campaign finance world, but that's a different conversation for a different call. But what that shows me again is just we spend so much more time attacking one another than we do talking about why we're the best candidate. And I think that's really hard for somebody who worked, in the public health sphere when the only right solution was a solution that helped our patients, to then transition into a mentality of that it's acceptable for us to talk about each other in a way that's not positive. And me and my campaign really tried to stay away from that. But when you're spending $500,000 on a race that's getting coverage from the media, and I had 12 different mailers that showed up in my mailbox that had my picture on it and said very unkind things about me. That's why a lot of you on this call probably don't want to get involved, because you think, oh, I made this mistake in high school, or, oh, I have this thing from my college years that I don't want people to know. And having to sacrifice the fact that people can use things or mistakes you've made in the past or information about you that maybe you don't want public all the way, that in the political world, nothing is off limits. Was a really hard pill to swallow, 100% worth it for me. And I would make that choice 100 out of 100 times. But I get why people are hesitant when, depending on if you have an R or a D behind your name, people treat you really differently. And in a place like Springfield that's split 50-50, right down the middle with Republicans and Democrats, I wish we could rise above that. And I know, like I said, my colleagues on this call are doing our part, and some of our Republican colleagues are doing their part as well. But that has definitely been an adjustment. And one of the hardest parts of the campaign trail and being elected official is people making those preconceived decisions about you before they get to know you.
And I'm going to, piggyback off of that in terms of, you're right. We talk about a lot of the barriers and a lot of the negativity that's out there. So for this next question, what are maybe some of the more impactful moments for you, or, something that, you worked on, you saw good results that you could kind of share with the audience to kind of reaffirm there are some good things happening out there?
Absolutely. So I'm assuming you're throwing that to me. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, we'll start with you. Yeah.
Great. So I'll give some kind of micro level examples and then some larger examples from the Capitol very quickly. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've been stopped in public by people who come up and thank me for the things that we're fighting for, especially this year around public education, and as well as, making Missouri a state where everybody feels welcomed and everybody feels included. One of the main reasons I ran for office is to pass the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act. I want Missouri to be a place where everybody is safe and everybody feels celebrated and welcomed. And I can be at the grocery store, and I've had college students come up to me crying, saying, thank you for the work that you're doing. We feel like Missouri has hope because of you and Crystal and your colleagues. And that is the most amazing feeling that I could ever imagine. And though we don't win all of those fights in Jeff City, the fact that there are people up there fighting for them matters. On a legislative, from a legislative perspective, I think a big win for us as Democrats this year, even though it was a drawn out process, was Medicaid expansion. And for a lot of you on the call, I know you know what that means, but the people of Missouri voted to expand Medicaid to over 275,000 Missourians, which would mean that many more people being able to go to the doctor, see a therapist, all those things. Our appropriations team in Jeff City decided not to appropriate dollars to cover the cost of that, and ended up going to the courts where they said, yes, you have to do this. But if it wasn't for myself and my colleagues standing up every day and fighting for that, it could have been swept under the rug, and there could have been repercussions that would mean that, almost 300,000 people that live next door to us, that shop at the same stores that we shop at, don't get access to healthcare unfairly. And so even though some of the days are long, it is worth it 100% of the time, because you never know what that, trans child in the boot hill is watching us do on the House floor. And you never know what that person who's been wanting to go to doctor for 10 years and hasn't been able to up in inner city St. Louis, now they can. And it's because the people on this call are up there fighting. And that's an amazing responsibility.
Thank you. Absolutely. Representative Quaid.
Yeah, so I definitely want to echo what Representative Fogel said about when folks come and talk to you and thank you. There is no greater feeling in the world than knowing that what you're fighting for is actually impacting somebody's life. But I will kind of take a spin a little bit. We talked a little bit about the partisanship, and we could dive into how just awful that is right now in our country and state. But there are a lot of good things that happen in Jefferson City when it comes to bipartisanship. And one of the proudest things that I was able to work on was last legislative session. We had a team of 6 women from both sides of the aisle get together to work on a child welfare bill. And we spent a good year doing research on all sorts of different pieces of from foster care to homeless youth services and a whole bunch of different things that we were all working on. And we got together and wrote a giant piece of legislation, and it had changed multiple times throughout the process, but we were able to pass a bill that had bipartisanship thrown into it, and it really did a lot of really great things for the children of Missouri. And those types of things happen every single day in our state. You all get to hear the top lines of the things that we're fighting against or fighting for based on partisanship, because it gets good headlines and because people really care about that stuff. But there is so much that happens that we are actually voting for. If you look at Betsy and my voting record, we vote with the other side of the aisle a lot, and that happens so much more than people realize. And but that definitely was one of the proudest ones. I saw a question pop up of House Bill 1414 from the 2020 legislative session. And I had two pieces of legislation in it that I had been working on for a while. And anyway, those types of things, when they happen, especially in a time where things are so divisive and there's so much emotion in what we're doing, it is really nice to find those common grounds where we can work together to really do something good for our state.
That's great. How about on the local level? Councilwoman Hardinger, is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think prior to being elected to city council, it's interesting because I don't think that I really understood all of the different conversations that go on behind the scenes regarding a certain piece of policy. So sometimes when you're watching council meetings and you see us kind of quickly going through and, voting yes, these things are really important. And so having meaningful conversations with my fellow council members is really where the movement happens. And even having conversations with people that don't share your same perspective. I think one thing that I am challenging myself to do is to listen to other points of view, even if I feel like I've already decided that I don't agree with it, and just try to understand a little bit about, where they're coming from and why they think that would be the best policy to implement. I think it challenges my own worldview. I think it helps me to be an even stronger advocate for the things that I'm passionate about. But I think that's definitely one thing that I found really impactful, is just those conversations that happen, especially when you talk to someone who maybe is not on the same side of the fence as you are politically, but they agree with you, and you're working together to create policy that's going to transform a certain segment of the community. I just think that that's really powerful and that's really cool. I think another impactful moment was when I was electioneering on election day, and a woman came up with her daughter, and they were, going into the building to vote, and I'm kind of standing, of course, 60 feet away from the door, or whatever, just waving and saying hello. And the mother said to the daughter, she's like, "Look, that could be your next councilwoman." And the girl was like, "Oh my gosh," she was so excited. And I was like, that's very cool. And I hope that little girl can see that and see the example that myself and Representatives Fogel and Quaid and all the other women involved in politics, that we can be an example to all of those little girls out there who might think maybe that's something that I want to do, or I think that it's really cool that she gets to serve the community in that way, and get more people involved in the process. So I think that serving as an elected official is one way to contribute and give back, but there are so many other ways. The city has a lot of openings on boards and commissions where we need community input and citizens to volunteer and serve in that capacity. So I highly encourage people to really get involved if you think that being an elected official or serving in this way is something that you may want to do in the future.
Thank you. Such a great discussion. So many things left to talk about, but I did want to give an opportunity for the attendees today to throw out some questions. So if you have anything in the chat, I'm going to turn it over to Paige to moderate that portion of today's program. But also, if everyone would like to turn on their cameras so we can see your smiling faces, and thank you for attending today. Lastly, I'm going to be launching a poll, and we would love your input on that. This is part of United We's work across the state of Missouri to gain insight from women across the state. So Paige, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Monica, for sharing your first question here in the chat. If anyone else has questions, feel free to type those there. And I'll read this from Monica, and we'll allow any of you to hop in here and respond to this. But she's wondering if you could share a little bit about what makes you choose to endorse candidates for other races and the timing, and kind of generally, how do you go about making that decision to endorse or to not endorse another candidate? And so, Crystal, would you be willing to take that one first?
Yeah, definitely. So as minority leader, when it comes to House and Senate races and even statewide races, I do not endorse. That is a choice that I make. Honestly, lots of folks in my position have in the past, but I don't want to influence primary elections for my own party. I don't think that that is something that I should be doing. I think the voters, have that opportunity. And because my job is to get other Democrats elected, I provide my services to all of them, and then I don't want to pick and choose who those individuals are. When it comes to local races, I'll be honest with you guys, I go back and forth on whether or not I should or shouldn't pretty much every election cycle. You may have paid attention to my social media this last time for the local city council races, and I believe I put out my endorsement list like the day before. And again, I intentionally waited because I didn't want to influence in any real significant way. And not that I think that, everyone's just going to do what I tell them to do, but people often want to know my thoughts on it. But, we had a lot of really great people running this year. And there were folks that I was like, I would support both of these individuals, but, I like this one a little bit more. But ultimately, I decided for the local race this time because it was so hotly contested, and because of honestly the current climate and what's going on in our city and in the country, as well as the state. And those of you who paid attention to the local city council races, as Heather well knows, there was a lot of back and forth, and things got more dirty in the nonpartisan races this year between school board and city council than I have ever seen in our community. And that is not a direction I want us to go. And so I felt the need to endorse this go around because I felt like there were certain individuals who were participating in that negative campaigning that would take our city in a place that I just felt so passionately that was the wrong direction to go. So I did choose to endorse this time, but it's typically something that I don't do.
Sure, thank you so much. Councilwoman Hardinger or Representative Fogel, would either of you like to add anything to that around endorsements?
I'm pretty new to this, so I think generally speaking, if I feel very strongly about a candidate, I will share with folks my opinion and why I think that they are the best choice. I do get a lot of folks literally on any election day, local elections, who people are like, all right, what are the issues? What should I vote for? Who are all these people on the ballot? And so I try to be as objective as possible and give the facts and let people make decisions on their own. But as Crystal mentioned, sometimes you're just in a political climate where it's really important to share your thoughts and ideas about the direction that you want to see the community go. And sometimes that's saying, this person I feel like would be a really great fit to guide us in this direction. I don't know. That's a really, really good question. I think endorsements can be tricky, but I also think that they can really make a powerful statement too.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and kind of echo the sentiment. My job, I was elected to represent the 135th district, and everything I do is to serve that mission. Endorsing candidates in other races is not where I choose to spend my time because it's not directly serving my constituency. That being said, if anyone reaches out, I've had members that are going to run as Republicans who have reached out to me and asked me campaign related questions or have asked me for assistance. And that's kind of my motto. If somebody reaches out and asks me my thoughts or asks me for help, no matter who you are, I'm going to do my best to help you. But that's not something I lead with in public because I think voters will make an informed decision at the ballot box. And I believe in that every time.
Great. Thank you all so much. So I have two really great questions here, and I know we're running tight on time. So I'm going to throw both of these out and you all can choose which one you want to answer, or both if you do rapid fire. The first is to share a little bit about how you go how you go about putting together a campaign staff. Do you need a campaign staff? What does that look like? And then I received a direct message here, so others may not see this, but I love this question that is outside of running for office, because that's not for everyone. What is the one thing that someone could do to become more civically involved? And Representative Fogel, since you were just speaking, if you don't mind, I'll call on you first to answer either of those that you like.
Of course, I'll answer them both in one answer. So it depends, of course, on the race. If you're running a school board or city council race, that's going to look very different than if you're running a U.S. congressional race. For me, at the state rep level, I did have a campaign team. One of those members is on this call, and I will say, if you do choose to have a campaign team, build it wisely and treat them really well, because they're the people who stay up with you till 1 a.m. on the night before the election, putting up yard signs and being the emotional support. If you decide to run in a partisan race, of course, there's the Greene County Democrats, the Greene County Republicans who can offer you support depending on which party you're affiliated with. And then a nonpartisan race, of course, there'd be resources there as well. So, wait, what was the second question? I wanted to answer that one too.
For people who may not want to run.
Got there. You know, I will use my race as an example of why it's important for constituents to get involved. As we already said, we had one Democrat in the lower half of the state. My district flipped by 76 votes out of 18,000. So what that tells me is if I had one less person who trusted me with their money, or one less person who didn't trust me enough to give me their time and to volunteer for me, we would not have a second Democrat in the southern half of Missouri. And I think that that is a true testament to the democratic process. We all have gifts. Some of that is with monetary donations. Some of that is with time. Some of that is with licking envelopes. There's all sorts of things that you can do to support a candidate that you believe in. So that would be my advice and encouragement is, if you don't think that you're at a point in your life where you can run for office, get behind a candidate that shares your vision of Missouri and fight to get them elected to whatever it is that they're running for.
Great, thank you. Representative Quaid or Councilwoman Hardinger, anything that you would like to add?
I'll jump in. I could spend a whole hour talking about how to run a campaign and what to do. It's one of my favorite things. But what I will quickly say to answer that question is absolutely you need a team of people, whether you're running for school board or US Congress. I encourage everyone who wants to run for something to gather your closest friends and have coffee, make dinner, and say, hey guys, I want to do this. Let's talk about it. When I first decided to run, I had 7 people at my dining room table. We have a whiteboard in our kitchen, and we just started writing out, like, what does this look like? What's my mission? What am I going to do? What am I going to say? Those people weren't always, they didn't stick with me all the way to the end in terms of my team of people that I paid or anything like that. But you absolutely need to surround yourself with people who are willing to dig in and help you. I will also add to that, call me, call Betsy, call any of us for coffee and sit down, and we're happy to have these conversations with you about helping you decide what you want to do, what you want, where you fit in, and then what the steps are to get that done. The second question, I echo Betsy's sentiment in that there is a place for everyone. Heather mentioned earlier all the boards and commissions that we are constantly having vacancies on. There are so few better places to influence your local community than sitting on a board and a commission. And I know I started on boards. I'm pretty sure everyone else on this call has as well. And so definitely jump in if you have any interest in that type of thing. But then, yeah, there's always a volunteer opportunity, making brownies and showing up with cookies for the staff. I mean, there are so many things that you can do, and just reach out to those individuals who are involved, and we'll find a place for you.
I'll just add to that. So I definitely agree with Crystal. Get your friends together. I am very fortunate. I had several friends and a family member, my sister, has worked on national campaigns in the past. So they gave me a lot of really great advice for where to start, because I'll be honest, I was super overwhelmed. I was like, am I going to get all this stuff done on time? Like, I pursued this at the last minute. It just took a lot of coordinating, but having a very strong team that knows what they're doing is essential. I had a lot of local support, but I'll also mention I received some support from progressive organizations that provided a lot of assistance for me. The first was the Campaign Greenhouse, which is a really great organization. It provides, affordable coaching if you're interested in sitting in on a Zoom call with other people who are running for office across the country and learning a little bit more about their experiences. I learned so much from people who were, you know, running for mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, and, you know, city council in a larger city. That really helped hone in my perspective, and it also gave me confidence to be like, okay, I'm doing things right. We're on the right track. And then I also received some endorsements from progressive organizations that provided some additional assistance to me that I may not have had otherwise, helping with video production and development, coaching before a big debate or a forum. All of those things are great, and I think you can probably find all of those locally within either your circles or, like Crystal said, reach out to one of us. We can probably connect you with a resource that can help you, you know, get started and understand what the process is like. So it is daunting, like it is intimidating. And I wish that the process was not as intimidating for women as it is, but hopefully we're doing what we can to change that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think just having, you know, the three of you here today to share your insights goes such a long way, I know, with everyone who has been able to join us. And so thank you again, Representatives Quaid and Fogel and Councilwoman Hardinger. I know on behalf of Rosie and from Beth and Wendy at United We, we're so thankful for you making the time to share with us this afternoon. I will quickly wrap up. I know we're just a couple of minutes over time, but be sure to check out those Missouri town halls that Wendy mentioned. That virtual statewide call will be happening on October 28th. And so it would be incredible to have your input provided in that setting. And then we will also reach out with more information about appointments project training that we're going to host here in Springfield through Beth and the team at United We, and that's likely going to take place in early December. And so we will get a date confirmed and more information out to everyone about that, because we would love to have you join us and really take a deeper dive into what does it look like if I want to serve on a board or a commission. You know, we've heard a lot today about that being a really great entry point for those of you who may ultimately want to run for office or just serving in that board and commission capacity. And there are lots of openings, we know, at the local level and at the statewide level. And so we'll have more information and resources about how you can go about that. And I'll toss it quickly back over to Beth in case she has anything to close us out this afternoon.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to all our amazing panelists, and thank you for all you do as leaders in Missouri. And also thank you for everyone who joined the conversation today. Really great to have you, and hopefully you've got some great takeaways from today's presentation. So I encourage you to get involved. You know, look at some boards and commissions, or start planning your campaign, and be sure to use either Rosie as a resource or United We. So thank you everyone, and have a great day.